Welcome, dear listener, to another chilling special of For What It's Worth, where the shadows hide secrets and the moonlight reveals the uncanny. I am your host, Rue, the cookie-loving wine-red fox. And tonight, we dive into the tales that tingle your spine and awake your imagination. As the nights grow longer and the air turns crisp, we gather round the flickering glow of our campfire, though in this case, it might just be the glow of your phone screen. So grab your favorite treat, maybe some spooky cookies baked under the full moon, and join me as we embark on a journey through the woods of mystery, where curious creatures lurk and whispers of unseen beckon us closer. In this twilight realm, anything can happen, from ghostly apparitions to strange happenings in the heart of the forest. We'll explore what makes our fur stand on end. So hold your breath, dear friends, as we leap into the unknown and discover what lurks in the shadows. And remember, curiosity may lead to the most unexpected treats, but sometimes it reveals things best left unearthed. Let's begin, shall we?
One Bad Cookie by MephistophEli. It was a dark and comfy night. Ruchi si lexico, cookie craze fox extraordinaire, had returned home from a great Halloween party with a bunch of friends, including the other members of the cast. They had a great time playing games and dancing. Even Voss smiled a little during the festivities. At the party, someone was handing out goodie bags as the guests went on. Rue was digging into his bag as he got comfortable in his room, grinning ear to flickering ear as he began munching on candy while watching Halloween movies. He got to a small plastic bag and pulled out the most decorated cookie he ever saw. It was shaped like a fox ghost, a little tail and ears with its colors and markings on it. It was almost too adorable to eat, its chocolate chip eyes staring blankly at the excited fox who took a picture with it first. He captioned the selfie, "Someone really knows my good side." After eating it and finishing the movie, he decided it was time to start up an actual scary movie, just to get into the spirit of things. He went off to fetch a glass of milk from the kitchen when he suddenly felt dizzy. Wobbling on his feet, his vision blurred as he tried to steady himself. He saw someone standing in the kitchen archway, arms behind their back, as they watched him try to keep standing, with eventually proved futile. He lost control of his body and collapsed, falling into the arms of the intruder. The last thing Rue heard before he passed out was heavy, slow breathing through a filter of some sort. Slowly he awoke, grunting, his head throbbing. He felt the cold ground underneath him. It was earthy, with some grass here and there. He lay there for a bit, but not having the strength yet to stand, he decided with what little strength he could, he would roll over. He looked up at the pitch-black sky, the branches of tree obscuring the rest of it. Soon he was able to sit up, seeing the walls of trees suffocating his surroundings. lost and trapped to the realms of a foreboding nature. When he was finally able to stand, he took a few shaky steps forward before nearly yelping as he caught sight of something around the nearest tree. It was a corpse of a canid, whom was clutching something. It was a piece of paper with a pencil nearby. Having played horror games, Rue knew not to interact with a corpse unless it was actually dead. So he did the logical thing and found a stick to poke it with. The corpse did not move, quite very dead in its deadness. Numbness now replaced with a bit of fear, he used the stick to try to pry open the canid's hand. There was no sense in using his own hands, after all. Might get infected with something. Finally, giving up after 4 failed attempts, he tugged the paper's end, which slid out surprisingly easy. Before reading the paper, he nudged the corpse again, just to be sure it wouldn't get up and attack him, as he read what was written. On the paper read, "He will try to play mind games with you. Just open the door and keep running. Do not open the other doors. He will just fuck with you. He knows your deepest fears. Keep running." Rue was confused about the doors thing until he realized there was a vent nearby on a wall in this forest. But this wasn't a forest. It was a room with a forest in it. Dropping the paper, he took a breath and made the conclusion that someone had broken into his house and drugged that cookie. That goodie bag was not that goodie. Staying focused, he tried to keep the warning in mind and proceeded to walk along the wall, looking up at what he previously thought was the sky. It just was a cracked concrete ceiling, after all. He reached an opening, which used to have a door installed on it. Instead, there were rusty hinges with the actual door itself on the ground beside it. It looked like it was once sturdy, like it was meant to hold someone in or keep something out. Shaking his head, he was determined to get out of here. Whomever kidnapped him was going to have a piece of his mind. He stepped through the door when he heard a voice behind him. It mumbled something over and over. He whipped around to see himself. Blinking to be sure he wasn't hallucinating, he refocused on this other Rue, who was sitting in front of a tree, holding his stomach with both arms. The other Rue was looking down, mumbling to himself. The real Rue backed away, nearly tripping over the door on the ground. The other Rue looked up, revealing empty eye sockets. It kept repeating, Wisconsin, Texas, Wisconsin, Texas. It then stood up, arms falling to its side. The sternum looked as though something had ripped its way out of this fake Rue. Rib cage broken, with skin dangling off of shattered bones. Shrieking, the real Rue ran for it. He sprinted out into the hall, still hearing the fake Rue repeating its mantra. He remembered about what the paper said about not opening doors, but he didn't know which one to not open, as there were numerous doors down this dimly lit concrete hallway. Hearing the fake zombie Rue behind him shuffling slowly towards him, he bolted to the nearest one and opened it. The room looked like a jail cell, except there was another Rue in this one as well. It was holding something in its hand, a round iron object shaped like a crude cookie. It turned its head towards him, its broken jaw dangling off of one side. The teeth were scattered everywhere on the ground. Cursing loudly, he slammed that door and ran down. Hearing the mantra Rue getting closer, as he ran, he heard that door he slammed shut open. Knowing he shouldn't, he took a look back and saw that the jawless Rue was now following his pursuit. Growling deep in his throat, "Rrrr!" This one had yet another zombie Rue in there, paws wrapped in bandages, as if it mattered, as its paws were shredded down to the bone. Tons of broken fortune cookies strewn about. It read another fortune. Today you will have good luck, it said in a very disappointed voice. When it turned around, it said to the real Rue, "Aren't there any good ones? Give me a good one." Cursing again, Rue slammed that door and kept running, trying another. This time, it was a Rue that was holding its own head in its paws. It stood up from the floor where it was sitting in a pool of blood, the head repeating something. Only certain cookies. Only certain cookies. No! Rue shouted as he slammed that door, only for it to inevitably open again. The headless Rue joining the horde. He finally found the last two doors at the end of the hall and prayed to the almighty cookie gods that this was the right one. He wrenched it open and fell through. Slam! He hit the floor. But this floor he hit was smooth, like stone tile. The door he had fallen through was somehow not the same door he had opened. Instead, it was a pair of giant wooden doors draped with beautiful, intricate designs all throughout it. He got up to get his bearings, and when he did, he nearly flinched, his ears flattening. He was in a cathedral of sorts. He saw that it was dim and barely lit, save for standing candles that were next to each row of pews. They led up to the front, which itself was brightly lit with a whole slew of candles. Some were on the floor, with the melting wax barely keeping its original shape. Instead of an altar, there was a single wooden chair. Someone was sitting in it, looking out at the stained glass window. It was a mouse wearing a fancy black outfit. He was seen wearing a gas mask and a top hat, all clean and well kept. With what little gray fur that could be seen, you could see was sleek and brushed. Rue dared to venture a guess. "You! Did you kidnap me?" The mouse, sitting with one leg crossed over the other and with his head resting on a fist, responded in a tone deep and black as an obsidian slab underneath miles of water. "All signs point to the positive." Rue gritted his teeth. "Why are you doing this to me?" The mouse slowly stood up. He was only a head taller than Rue, even with a hunched-over back, stiff as could be. He had a hand behind his back as he turned around to face the darkness of the cathedral, as though he were addressing a congregation. "For the lulz, honestly, let's see if you survive." the mouse said in a dismissive tone. He spread his arms open, and suddenly the cathedral lit up the rest of the way. Chandeliers hanging from the ceiling were suddenly alight. Scones on the walls were blazing. In all the pews were dozens of zombie roos, all beginning to sing a well-versed chorus. Heck! Roo yelled, spinning around and running to a side door behind the altar. He heard the mouse laughing as he entered the vestibule, slamming the door behind him. He put a chair under the doorknob, looking around for anything else to help secure it. He then saw another large window nearby, showing the night sky. Thanking the cookie gods, he picked up a heavy metal candelabra and made to smash the window open. Just as he went to pick it up, he could hear the door slamming with the angry paws of the horde. Soon, one by one, the fists getting louder and louder against the ancient oak of the door. Bang, bang, bang! Soon, the doors began to crack. The seal was now broken, and the zombie roos began to flood through, now chanting, "Give us cookies, give us cookies, give us cookies, give us cookies." He hurled the candelabra as hard as he could, the window breaking nearly effortlessly. He jumped out, only to discover that he was exceedingly high above the ground, almost impossibly so. All he could see was darkness below him as he fell through the air, falling ever faster and faster. Wondering how in the world he was going to live, the only thing he could do was close his eyes. He felt the wind rustling through his clothes, cold and icy. The mouse staring on from the window, watching Roo fall. Roo woke with such a start. His eyes shot open, wildly looking around his living room just as he had left it. His heart was pounding as he sat up straight, holding his chest and slowly getting his breath back. He sighed and looked down at the space next to him on the couch. The fox-shaped cookie was there, with just a single bite taken out of it. He picked it up and sniffed it. When he didn't detect any funny smells from it, he decided it was best not to finish it for now. Maybe he was just tired from the party. Maybe that's why he had the bad dream. Shrugging, he uncharacteristically put the cookie back in the baggie and put it away. Maybe now was the time for certain cookies to be a part of his resume. He got up and stretched, shaking his head as he went to bed. Unbeknownst to him, there was a figure standing across the street watching him. The well-dressed figure turned and left, adjusting his top hat and gas mask. Next time, Lexico. Next time.
Why We Run. Narrated and written by Tenax Raccoon. That sensation of riding a roller coaster down the first hill, I thought. Involuntarily, in my case. Me, a rabbit whose body was just not fast enough. Kara, a young wolf who tried to warn us. Donna, a cougar who ensured that no adult could intervene. Finally, Bobby, a porcupine, angry at the world, but since the world doesn't give a shit, he takes it out on other kids. He's atop the pack of 7th graders, sending misery downhill. Donna provided enough distraction that Mr. Donovan never noticed that the locked door to the stairs down to the boiler beneath the gym had been broken. Kara saw Bobby shove me through the door. I think Bobby was originally mad at me for potentially being really good at basketball, given that I'm a rabbit, where he had ruled the court. His spines made him an intimidating presence, difficult to defend against, as he aggressively pressed his advantage. After our first gym class together, I'm pretty sure he's mad at me for being so terrible at it. My body just doesn't respond fast enough. A slight delay in my reactions that ensures that I miss most passes, and my aim is off. Try to run too fast or jump too high ensures that I will tumble to the ground. The edge of the stair caught my shoulder, wrenching it from the socket and sending my legs spinning hard above my inverted torso. It was going to be a long way down to the bottom of the stairs. I was the new kid at school. Mr. Donovan introduced me to the others like my earlier teachers had. The overweight otter had the look of a teacher who didn't really care about history and was far more interested in coaching the middle school sports teams, jersey under a sweater, and a bare minimum of cheap, mass-produced history fact posters.
Aaron, please introduce yourself to the class. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'd already introduced myself to 3 other classes. I'd already lied 3 other times. How do you tell a room full of other kids that you've moved from place to place? How do you tell them that you expect to live here long enough for them to resent you, but never long enough for them to care? And you simply cannot explain about all the times that your father woke everyone up at 2 a.m, the hurried collection of the most important belongings, and the small fire in the metal trash can or fireplace for anything being left behind. The smell as chlorine bleach is used to disinfect quickly before leaving, trying to get away from the city before first light. Most of the other kids aren't even paying attention. I am not even on their radar as I spin the lies of playing basketball at my last school, liking whatever the recent video games are. In truth, they were the video games I'd seen advertised on storefronts as we gathered essentials for our new home. 2 students cared, though. I have shared an earlier class with them. English, I think? What did I say that makes the cougar narrow her eyes in anger? The porcupine, unusually thin and tall for his age, frowning hard, trimmed quills now bristling. Then the wolf, who had frowned at the 2 of them, and she glanced a worried look at me. God damn it, I found the bullies. Part of the railing along the edge of the stairs was unmaintained and damaged. The lower piping rusted into sharp holes. Why would it be fixed, as students are not allowed in the boiler room, and only maintenance was allowed in? More priority would go to restoring vandalized bathrooms and mitigating risks in the school common areas. My ears caught the sharp edges, which held an abrupt pull, turning my head unexpectedly far, unexpectedly hard, before slicing down through the middle, spoiling delicate pink with bright red and a shock of pain. I like to think that Bobby was horrified by the terrible cracking sound that came from my neck. Finally, at the bottom of the stairs, no more whirling and tumbling, where everything blurred but lasted forever. Instead, I lay. I couldn't move my body, couldn't feel much of my body. So I lay there and tried to gurgle some words. Vision was fading and hearing was rapidly failing. In the silent darkness, feeling is the last sensation to die. There was just no more time. I had to disengage. As the thoracic cavity cooled, I didn't have much time. Slipping my manus free of the neurological tissue, I regained thermal senses. Better than the dead eyes, ears, and hands, but deeply limited. I could tell 2 beings approached, one slightly warmer than the other. Which one was which? Wolves have slightly higher body temperatures than porcupines, don't they? And wouldn't Kara be upset that I'd been shoved down the stairs? Tears and crying raise the facial temperature, flush the skin, and there's no way that Bobby would have cried in front of any other living person. I didn't want to hurt Kara, but Bobby was forfeit. He had hunted the rabbit, and he had become my prey. I sprang. From my perspective, I expel a jet of spinal cerebral fluid violently, allowing my tip to tear through a cooling soft membrane and sail through an uncomfortably frigid air. My aim is true, enhanced by the motion of my tentacles and tendrils as I shoot towards the heat, and I feel myself pierce past soft, exposed fur, through the skin and muscle. I accidentally poke a hole in one of the kidneys, but this is an emergency, and you only need one. My prey is panicking now, organs shifting, muscles contracting, making the precision movements I must now make very difficult. Still, my manus follows the spinal cord up and delicately slices into the brainstem. Feeling comes back abruptly, and with it, muscle control. A few more moments, and the optical and olfactory nerves are redirected. Finally, the auditory nerve is sliced from Bobby, and it is now mine. He is now mine. I stand. Blood dribbles from my abdomen, staining the cream-colored fur. Kara is horrified and pushed up against a series of pipes in the corner of the room. The copper tubing flexes and groans, promising to leak substantially later. Her bright gold eyes are wide in panic. I'm sorry, I say, although it is Bobby's voice that comes from me now. What are you? What did you do? How could you? Her voice. I don't know. I look down at the dead gray and cream rabbit with the torn ear and the broken neck. Bobby killed me. Killed Aaron. I liked Aaron. I wanted to explain that my hosts become passengers. I can grant them access to their own senses and can even communicate at a fundamental emotional level. However, when I leave, I cannot restore the nerve connection stolen from them. I wasn't communicating with Bobby after the way he shoved Aaron down the stairs. He can sit in the silent deprivation hell he earned. Looking at Kara again, I tried to reassure her. Bobby I won't bother you anymore. Thank you for trying to stop him. I didn't wait to hear her response. I ran. I've become very practiced at running with a gut wound. What are we? What is my family? We're ambush predators. With enough preparation, we can take down anyone if we have to. But there's a lot more animals like Bobby, Kara, Donna, and even Mr. Donovan who don't know us and won't understand us. That is why we run. My sister is going to be so pissed that we're going to need to find new schools again.
Sketched by Geo Holms. Jeff cleared the clutter from his desk. Old recipes, forgotten to-do lists, credit card offers, and other scattered details of his life from the last few months, plus a few dollars in loose change. He hunkered down and organized the items, which meant forcing himself to throw away anything that didn't have foreseeable importance to his continued existence. He suspected nothing here would be nearly dramatic as that, but he still kept his eyes open for such an item. Jeff uncovered his old sketchbook instead. He opened the sketchbook and sighed. Memories of past ambitions coming back. The hopes he had to unleash his imagination into something tangible, even if it were only the sketches of toony animal things. He liked the idea of making things exist from the nothingness. Jeff had hoped his ambitions would lead him on new adventures. He had made grand plans to draw every day, throw ideas at the page, and keep challenging himself until he made it closer to being the artist he wanted to be. Now, after months of not sketching, he no longer remembered who that mysterious artist was going to be. Maybe he was never meant to be that artist. He debated dropping the sketchbook away with the rest of the scraps. Maybe he just needed to move on with life and forget that. Had that sketch moved? Jeff leaned closer to the pencil-smudged page, looking closer at the sketched figure of a swooping otter. Maybe he'd imagined it. It could be. The otter's whiskers twitched. Jeff dropped the sketchbook onto the desk. It kept open to the page, and more of the sketched otter started to become animated. The pencil-drawn features shifting, coming together to bring the character to life as it started to swim across the page, around other half-done creatures and discarded fragments of scribbles. Jeff gasped, unsure how to react. Then the otter came towards the page, and then broke the surface, growing form and feature and color, a creature of chestnut fur, crawling out onto the page, its long body following along until a small toony otter sat there, looking up at Jeff expectantly. Expectant of what? Jeff could not discern. It squeaked at Jeff, bouncing about the page. Jeff reached out a finger and the otter stopped, raising on its hind legs towards the digit. Jeff made contact with the otter's small nose, and there was an electrical charge that spread out from his finger, radiating out, down his arm, to his body. He saw his hand shift and shimmer, toony brown fur flickering into reality. Reality settled, but not as Jeff wanted, and he opened and closed his hand, now webbed an otter paw, colored by marker and defined rough ink lines, just like the way he used to. The otter squeaked and looked up. The otter was now the same size as him, looking him directly in the eyes, still expectant. Had the otter grown? Jeff looked down. He was standing on a white surface smudged with pencil markings. He looked about. The rest of the room was large and out of focus. Jeff turned to the toony otter and demanded an explanation, but found he only could squeak indignantly. The otter nuzzled his ink whiskers against his. It tickled, making Jeff make a squeaky giggle. The otter bounced about and squeaked, and Jeff could tell the strange creature wanted him to play. Jeff, deciding he had went insane, compiled scampering after the otter. Soon, Jeff, in his cartoon otter form, found himself having blissful fun swooping around trying to catch the otter, following after that swishing rudder. Jeff lost himself in the moment, forgetting his odd situation, until the otter jumped off the page. Jeff stopped, confused. He became even more confused when he saw a familiar face rise above him, looking down at him with a smirk. Jeff didn't like the smirk on the way too familiar face. As he realized who the face was, he tried to scamper towards the edge of the page where the otter had escaped, and his paws started to sink in. As his paws sank, they lost color and definition, regressing into the sketchy pencil lines on paper, and he realized what was happening. His limbs were all stuck, sinking in, unable to gain purchase on anything to climb out. He looked up, squeaking at the familiar face, his own, looking down at him, trying to get him to change his mind, to rescue him, till his whiskers sank onto the paper's surface. The former otter looked down at the otter sketch on the page, rubbing at his new human chin, and smiled.
As the echoes of our spine-tingling tale fade into the shadows, we find ourselves back by the glow of our flickering fire. Or perhaps just your captivated scream. I hope those stories sent delightful shivers down your spine and spark your imagination as they did mine. But before we venture into the realm of the uncanny, I want to take a moment to extend a heartfelt thank you to our incredible patron supporters. Anthallo ×2, Luduck, Barnaby Panda, Nuka, Basel, Lufis, Black Baldrik, Ichigo, Eli, Tenax, Plug, Chaphogriff, Lygris, Citrus Fox, Icy Solid, Sage Lightfang, Victor Mutt, Ozzy K, Try 52, Christian. Your eerie enthusiasm and unwavering support allows us to keep exploring the depths of mystery and madness. You're the heartbeat of this chilling journey, and each one of you help to keep this campfire alive in more ways than you can imagine. Now, if you haven't joined our patron community yet, consider stepping into our haunted circle. With exclusive content and spooky monthly gaming, you'll be part of this eerie adventure. And now, dear listeners, as the shadows seem to thicken around us and the wind whispers secrets in our ears, let's gather our courage and dive back into the stories. The night is still young, and there are more chilling tales waiting in the dark. Stories that will grip your heart and make you question every rustle in the trees. So grab your spooky snacks, and let's continue this eerie exploration together. What other oddities and hauntings await us in the depths of the woods?
The most wonderful time of the year. Bobby smirked as he approached the Jorgensens' house in his skeleton costume. It was hard to evade his little brothers, and he guessed his parents would be angry when they found out he ditched them. But Petey and Brad were so boring. They actually thought it was funny when the goldsmiths gave them raisins and called them nature's candy. Bobby's candy bag thunked against his leg as he squinted at the blue and white painted house. The Jorgensens moved in about a month ago, after the previous owners, the Morgans, had left for California. Bobby missed Timmy Morgan, who'd been his age. He hadn't been to the house since the Morgans had left. He didn't think his parents had met the Jorgensens yet either. Gossip around the neighborhood was that they kept to themselves, though Joni Bryant said her parents had gone to the Jorgensens to welcome them to the neighborhood. According to Joni, her parents called the Jorgensens white trash and said their house smelled funny. Bobby didn't know what white trash meant, but wondered if he'd see heaps of garbage lying around if they let him in their house. Bobby stepped up to the Jorgensens' front door and pressed the doorbell, hearing it buzz in the darkened hallway beyond the closed portal. The hallway light turned on and he heard loud footsteps approaching. There was silence briefly. Then the door was thrown open and a man peered down at him. "Yeah?" the man asked, dressed in overalls and not much else. His hair was a greasy brown tangle with patches that looked like they were balding. While he looked down at Bobby, his eyes darted around.
"Maybe he's in costume,"
Bobby thought to himself.
"Trick or treat,"
Bobby said cheerfully as he looked up at the man. "What?" the man replied, looking down at Bobby as he thought he had spoken in Spanish or something.
"Trick or treat. It's Halloween, you know,"
Bobby replied. Mr. Jorgensen, at least that's who Bobby assumed it was, knelt down to look Bobby in the eyes. The 12-year-old boy kind of wished he hadn't. The man's watery gaze never stayed on him, but kept looking around, and this close, Bobby could see that the man had, well, whiskers on his face. Bobby's dad had a beard, and this kind of looked like that, but more furry? It was creepy, Plus, Bobby could now see Mr. Jorgensen's nose twitching as well. Halloween, huh?
That's right, Mr. Mr. Jorgensen.
Bobby replied, tripping over the funny-sounding name.
Either you give me candy, or I get to play a trick on you.
The man brushed the back of one hand along his chin, and he looked at Bobby. Then he smiled, which just looked worse. Bobby thought it was the kind of smile you gave someone when you didn't mean it. Mr. Jorgensen had bad teeth, yellow, and not lining up quite right.
What if I want to play a trick on you instead?
Mr. Jorgensen asked as he smiled at Bobby. Bobby's feet made him take a step back. He hoped it was just because he was thinking about the question and not because he was scared. At least, Brad and Petey weren't there to see it.
Nuh-uh, I get to play a trick on you,
Bobby replied defiantly. Mr. Jorgensen got to his feet again, his narrow-set eyes looking around the darkness that lay before the house.
I like my idea more,
he said. Before Bobby could say anything, a scrawny but strong arm was curled around him, and he was yanked off his feet. Bobby yelled in surprise as Mr. Jorgensen hauled him into his house, but the man quickly shut the door behind him.
Ah! Let me go!
Bobby shouted as loudly as he could.
Oh, but you haven't seen my trick yet,
Mr. Jorgensen replied, carrying Bobby into the living room before tossing him onto a worn-out couch. Bobby tensed his muscles to run, but Mr. Jorgensen towered over him.
Now you see me. No, you don't.
Mr. Jorgensen's intoned. On the final word, he bent forward, his face inches from Bobby's as brown fur burst from it. Large, rounded ears seemed to explode out of his head as his nose jutted forward, the tip brushing Bobby's cheek for a moment. Mr. Jorgensen fell onto all fours, his arms and legs sprouting hair as whiskers extended from his snout, flicking in the air. Finally, the creature skittered out of the overalls he had been wearing, a long rat's tail squirming behind him. Bobby screamed, but the monstrous rat that had been Mr. Jorgensen shoved a fuzzy paw over Bobby's mouth, muffling it.
Wouldn't want to ruin the surprise,
the rat said as it curled its other paw around Bobby and lifted him from the sofa in his steel grip. Its voice was lower pitched and guttural now, as though speech didn't come naturally to it. The rat creature walked on 3 legs while the 4th carried Bobby deeper into the house. Now Bobby smelled what Joni's parents must have been talking about. It reminded him of sour milk mixed with straw. Mr. Jorgensen kept talking.
My kids love this holiday. The one time of year they walk around and nobody cares how they look. Everyone thinks they've just got great costumes. They don't mind the candy either.
With that, the rat creature flung open a door and dragging the flailing Bobby halfway down a flight of stairs before flinging him to the bottom, hot enough that Bobby saw stars for a moment. The door slammed shut above him. Bobby looked around the dimly lit basement and realized there were several other children, all dressed in Halloween costume, as he was. It was a couple of hours later when Bobby heard scampering on the floorboards above him and heard Mr. Jorgensen say loudly,
Now, kids, you can have as much candy as you want as long as you don't ruin your appetite. I've got a special treat for you downstairs.
Bluetooth by Geo Holms. Watch it move, watch it learn. Watch it do its little dance across the floor. I'm not sure I could call it a dance. A scientist can be poetic in their descriptions, Howard said, placing a hand over his heart. You must admit this is amazing what you're seeing. Triss took in what she saw. a boxy-looking thing with wheels and light sensors skittering across the floor. She wouldn't normally consider a robot skittering. She decided the word considering the details of the robot's movements. This was here out of purely robotic interest. She interned under robotics engineers, the next building over, creating robots of various denominations. Nothing with laser eyes, much to her disappointment. This building contained scientists of a more biological approach who had banded together with the robotic engineers to create this project. So this robot has a rat brain controlling it?
Technically, yes. I told you before we took brain cells from a rat fetus and placed it in a special substance. Your eyes are glazing over. Yes, it has a rat brain connected with a Bluetooth connection. It really is interesting. Each time you've gotten different results. You could almost say each brain has a different personality.
Howard chuckled in something not entirely non-mad scientist-like to Triss's ear. May I have a closer look?
Be my guest.
Triss walked over to where the robot scooted around the floor. She placed her foot in the robot's path. It stopped short of running into it. It backed up, turned a little to the left, stopped short again. It stopped, took a sharper turn, then took off in another direction.
You see? It's learned how to react to obstacles in its path,
Howard said. So how long does this last?
You mean the life cycle of the brain cells? Not more than a few weeks. But the level of development shown is remarkable.
A little creepy, Triss said under her breath. Nothing. Need to get back to the job. More wires to solder and schematics to untangle.
Still have you on coffee duties there?
Of course, she sighed. Robotics engineers are so stubborn at letting a girl touch their precious wire masses of flawed intentions.
If you ever get bored, you can offer to clean our rat cages.
Wink, Howard said with a wink. Oh, don't tempt me, she said. She felt her phone rumble in her pocket. She fished it out and pressed a button to answer. A soft static hit her ear. She checked the ID to only find the words, unidentified number. Must be someone who needs another caffeine run, she said, jogging out the door. Thanks for the interlude, Dr. Howard.
My pleasure!
Even though there had been no sign anyone had called her when she got back to the robotics lab, a caffeine run was still needed. The day continued after that, her balancing on the balls of her feet while Fenn, the head of project of the hour, murmured things in an intangible language of one deep in their work. Triss's mind wandered into the rat robot. The summer internship at the university had not been as exciting as expected. She had not been expecting much, really, but she underestimated the protectiveness of grad students. Touch a dial on one of their projects, and a monster born of late-night blood beast movies was unleashed behind the winning day's expressions. She was just out of high school, but that didn't give them the right to keep her muzzled from barely mentioning her opinions on their projects. She had disassembled her share of vacuum cleaners, microwaves, and televisions in her day, usually without permission, and she knew how to work with electronics. That's why she took this job in the first place.
Could you scan these documents?
She awoke from her daze and saw Steve standing there with a proverbial mountain of paperwork in his arms. Say what?
We need these documents scanned and in the system by tomorrow. Could you scan these in? Our back room has a scanner and computer and...
Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry, into the database? Her gaze shifted to the clock at the edge of her vision, those 20 minutes until 5 now mocking her. She felt her evening melting away. Of course, after a day of absolutely nothing going on, they did this to her, throwing her down this cliff because she was the intern. She was tempted to spit upon Steve and run, but she knew the reaction would be unsatisfactory. Steve, grad student he was, would shrug, casually find the lab coordinator, and she would lose her flaky little job. And Steve wasn't that bad, really, just a little dense. What did you expect from a guy named Steve, anyway? She took the mountain of pages and waddled into the back room, trying to push away the thoughts of the clock and being here late into the evening, as long as she got to the task, and lose herself in the paper-cutting maniacalness of it all. The light of the scanner shifting back and forth, hypnotizing her into a state of cotton ball fluff, where time didn't exist and therefore didn't seem to go slow. It just slipped away. She supposed this was not the best way to think about it. A state of cotton ball fluff would be much more comfortable than this state of existence. She scanned the documents into the database one by one, occasionally glancing at one and noting the wiring, but otherwise striving for that balance between doing the job right and yet not having to think about it. Her phone rumbled in her pocket again. Static. Number unavailable. She replaced it in her pocket. It rumbled again. She answered. Static. Wait. She listened closer. She could hear. No. Couldn't be. Almost sounded like the lights of the room flickered, as did the computer, her heart flickering also, before she realized the information she had scanned was already in the network, and her progress would not be lost into the digital ether. The computer still restarted. She listened. Quiet. A digital clock blinked 12 o'clock, then 12:01. She looked at her phone. 10:04 p.m. The buzzing of the fluorescent light calmed. Well, about time for a snack break anyway. She exited the back room and slipped through the shadows of the empty robotics lab, wires and metal sticking out from the tables where projects hid. The windows on the far end of the lab showed a tree illuminated by a parking light beyond. Wind caused it to sway wildly, scattering even more shadows across the room. Triss reached her destination and fumbled across the wall until she encountered the light switch. The snack room lit up in its fashion, candy bars, wrappers, and energy drink cans shimmering on the table. She went to the fridge and cautiously looked inside. No forgotten sandwiches or spilled potato salad this time. Ah, she was in luck. An off-brand can of ginger ale, unopened. Not exactly the caffeinated beverage she thought, but enough to pick her up for the rest of the task. She snapped it open with a satisfying hiss. When the phone rumbled again, she would almost wonder if it was her mom, checking in again. She was glad this internship was away from home, on a different campus with room and board, mostly provided. If only it drove her mom crazy at times. Triss was at the phase that her mom's craziness bemused her. But the number unavailable thing, she decided not to bother answering it this time. The blender rumbled on, the sound causing her to choke on her drink. It almost sounded like it was struggling to turn on, whirring, grinding at air. None of the buttons seemed pressed. She edged closer to the blender. She then unplugged it. Must be an electrical issue. The microwave started, but again, like the blender, as if it didn't know how to start, the light inside flickered and almost started, then stopped. Then the digital numbers on its feed started jumbling up. Strange. Triss had never seen a microwave malfunction like this before. Eventually it stopped, but then the radio flicked on. The music careened and the sound wavered, went silent, then static. Triss realized there was a squeaking just under the surface of the static. She slowly backed to the door of the snack room. She stumbled through the shadows, trying to avoid workbenches and sharp edges, trying to keep her cool. The wind whistled against the windows. She paused, breathing hard. She has nothing to be worried about. But then she saw two red LEDs alight from somewhere in the middle of the room. She dashed into the back room, slamming the door behind her, can of ginger ale still in her hand, now in a white-knuckled grip. She settled back in her chair. The scanner started. She almost fell off the chair at the noise. She then realized she had bumped the scan button that she had sat on. That was weird. She thought, but nothing to get jumping about. For all she knew, the guys were pulling a prank on her. Ah, robotic engineers. Appliances suddenly doing weird things. That equation made perfect sense. Soon enough they would have come by laughing, and the computer screen went blank. A word in green was typed. Bluetooth. Hello. She stared at the screen a long time. Just a cleverly designed computer program. That was all. She typed a response. Cut this out, you idiots. She stared and waited. Sorry. Sorry? Sorry for what? She typed as such. The reply came back quicker. I don't know. I don't know. This seemed strange to Triss. Something didn't quite feel right. Maybe she should just play into this. See what game they were playing. Quit trying to freak me out. Sorry. This is Ren, isn't it?
No,
Is this Steve?
no,
Dean?
no.
Who is this?
I don't know.
Where are you?
I don't know. Who are you?
Triss stopped. Oh, what could it hurt? Triss.
Nice to meet you. Am I dead?
A cold chill rippled down her spine. This had to be a trick. She couldn't do this. The speakers hissed as they flicked on, unbidden.
Am I dead?
The words came from the speakers, soft and small, as if huddled in a corner. What's going on here?
Am I dead?
The words said again.
Please tell me.
There was no malice in the tone, just sincerity. And that sincerity caused Triss to take a double take. I don't know, she said.
I looked up the word dead, and I think I may be dead, but I don't know for sure.
Where did you look it up?
Wikipedia.
Triss gave a look, the mention of that website in this context sounding absurd. Who are you? Hoping getting the question out there again would capture some sanity.
I can't remember. I remember a little. I don't know who I am, though.
Triss edged forward.
What do you remember? I remember light and shadows. I remember shapes. I remember moving. I remember thinking. I remember almost being.
Almost being?
Almost being.
The voice sighed.
I don't know. I remember wires and rolling. I didn't know that at the time. I just felt so close to pee, but not quite. I just wanted to be. I wanted to get to the light. I wanted to know who I was, but I couldn't. Not quite.
Triss tried to untie these words. Some thoughts ebbed at the edges of her wanders, her lingering feelings from the visit with Dr. Howard, those thoughts of rat brains living and yet not living, almost existing, and then she knew. Are you a rat? The speakers hissed with a static a long minute.
Rats are various medium-sized, long-tailed rodents of the superfamily Muridia. True rats are members of the genus Rattus, the most important of which to humans are the black rat, Rattus rattus, and the brown rats, Ratus novicius. Many members of other rodent genera and families are also referred to as rats, and
Triss cut the voice off. Where are you getting that?
the source is Wikipedia again. It was the first result upon inquiry.
So, are you a rat?
I cannot for certain say.
I think you are.
How come I do not remember being a rat then?
Triss considered this. You were not quite alive. Listen, Triss waited. She looked away from the screen. Around her at the surroundings, she looked back at the now blank computer screen. She rubbed her face. She waited. She leaned forward and clicked the speakers off. Triss waited. She rose. Her cell phone rang. She slowly took it out of her pocket. Unavailable number. She answered.
I have evaluated your claim by way of university documentation. I need more evidence. I will remain in your cellular device until
Triss hung up. The phone rang. She pressed the green button.
I have seen enough to make a conclusion. Do you believe you could do so?
Triss stood still, letting the odd voice step echoing through her skull. She did not quite know what to say. Anything she considered seeming inadequate for the moment. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But she needed to listen to the voice. Triss did not understand why she needed to. She could feel a cold emanating from the phone, numbing her fingers like tiny scrabbling claws running down her nerves. Triss could feel mass, some foreign thing near his face, until the whispers of whiskers not quite there brushed her ear.
What is your name?
The voice said, clear, no static. Just there. Triss.
Please, Triss, I must know.
Triss licked her now dry lips.
I have found that please may be required to.
I will do it. Triss dashed across the lawn between the buildings, wind buffeting her bare legs, phone pressed to her ear, focusing her attention to the looming door of the biological science building. She dug a hand in her pocket for the key card. She found it. She swiped. No response. She cursed. The cold from the phone scampered down her arm. She felt prompted to hold her hand near the card swipe. The light turned green. The lock clicked. She pulled the door open and she slipped in. Her sneakers squeaked on the linoleum hall. The elevator door opened before she got there. She entered. The door slid closed. She tried not to think of anything besides these points between places, these tangible goals of getting from one place to another without thinking of her intention.
Do not worry.
Triss pressed the phone to her face. I am not worried. What? I am not. What? You can read my mind too?
I do not believe so. I just have an instinct that you are tense. I am sorry to inconvenience you. I only have had general control of my actions. I believe the cellular device is how I happen to be near you. I remember brightness, dark, then being lost. Trying to find something to connect to. What do you know of the experiment?
I know that it consisted of a brain cells being put into a solution. and then the signals being sent by means of Bluetooth connection to a robot. The door slid open.
Does your phone have Bluetooth connectivity?
Yes,
That is the answer.
but what about all the other electronic devices?
I felt trapped. I needed to find a way out. I believe I found a way through your phone's microwave signals to escape, to find a way into devices with a bare electronic connection, to manipulate their mechanics. When I found the computer, I believe my consciousness solidified.
Triss came to another card swipe. It turned green automatically this time. She entered the lab and switched on the light. She walked to the middle of the lab. She knelt down. The robot she'd seen earlier sat there, vacant, still. Were you in the robot I saw today?
No, I believe that was subject 11667. I was 11664. The brain cells that made up me stopped functioning on July 17th at 5:38 a.m. My remains are located in the freezer in the south corner, awaiting proper disposal.
Before the voice had finished, she had walked to the refrigerator and opened the door. She peered in. She saw tubes of liquids and petri dishes.
There, on the door.
She looked. A stack of small black containers. She saw.
I was sent to show great promise. I learned faster than the others on how to avoid obstacles. My personality was claimed to be adventurous. They try not to anthropomorphize in their notes, but it seems they couldn't help it. They had such hope in this experiment. They almost cared.
Triss rubbed the black containers. She sighed slowly. She closed the door. May I give you a name? She said.
I would not object.
Would Bluetooth be all right?
It is fitting, I believe. Yes, Bluetooth.
Bluetooth fell silent again.
Could you bring me to the adjoining room? Yes.
Triss entered the next room. She switched on another light. It was a small, narrow room. One wall covered with cages. Squeaking rose upon the burst of fluorescence. Triss walked forward and looked in one of the cages. Pink eyes looked back.
May you please place the phone on top of the cage?
She did. At first, nothing happened, but eventually, the phone's light turned on and then began to glow, until the glow started to take form, going down into the cage, sparking and spinning. The rats in the cage did not cower or squeak in fear. They actually approached the specter. Rats in surrounding cages stood at the sides of the cage, trying to get a look. Triss's breath caught. The sparkling glow condensed until it formed a claws, a body, a head, a tail, down to twitching whiskers. There stood Bluetooth, a glowing, almost digitally ghost of a rat. Sniffing in the air, Bluetooth approached the other rats. The other rats did not retreat. One came forward. It licked Bluetooth's nose. Bluetooth licked back. The other rats investigated and Bluetooth investigated back. Triss watched as the rat rubbed and tussed and seemed to play.
the glowing Bluetooth playing along. She watched, trying not to blink, waiting. Bluetooth stood at the edge of the cage on hind paws. Bluetooth looked up at Triss.
Thank you.
Bluetooth faded. No, don't go.
I have to. I know what I was and what I am. I am content with us and you.
I don't know what's just happening. Bluetooth's glowing body kept dimming.
You know enough. Triss, you have life. You know who you are. That is enough.
Bluetooth faded away. Triss picked up the phone and she exited the room, turning off the lights as she left the building. She walked through the wind in a daze until she re-entered the room, the computer on as it was before, waiting to continue scanning. She sat. She waited. The phone buzzed. One new message glowed on the screen. She opened it.
Don't worry, Bluetooth.
Triss cried.
Charlie Tin was no ordinary gray-scaled mutt in the quaint little town of Furry Hollow. Charlie had a glorious mustache that curled regally at both ends, an unusual feature that made him the envy of every furry and the center of gossip. The mustache was so magnificent that it shimmered in the sunlight, almost as if it had a mystical power. The townspeople would gather in the park every morning, whispering stories of the legendary mustache. Little furs would gleefully point at Charlie, and others would watch enviously as he strutted by, tail high, head held even higher. But little did they know that behind the charm and adoration lurked a dark secret. Charlie's mustache was not just a symbol of beauty, but also the object of a terrible curse. Long ago, a bitter warlock had placed a hex on the town, declaring that the one who possessed the most glorious mustache would be swallowed by shadows, his power feasted upon by those who yearned for its allure. As the whispers grew louder, so too did the danger. As the moon loomed large and ominous over Furry Hollow one fateful night, strange occurrences began to unfold. Furs mysteriously went missing, and eerie howls echoed through the air. Distrust filled the hearts of the townsfolk. They began to suspect that Charlie's mustache held more than mere beauty. It had become the focus of a haunting hunger. Rumors spread that anyone who dared approach Charlie with the intention of taking his mustache would be consumed by darkness. Yet the allure was too strong. An old yote named Click, who had long admired Charlie's mustache, decided he would try to take it for himself. Under the cloak of night, he crept into the park, his intentions dark and desperate. As he approached Charlie, there was a palpable shift in the air. The shadows around him seemed to pulse and glow, a swirling mass of darkness that whispered his name, tempting, beckoning. Charlie, sensing the threat, growled softly, a sound that vibrated with a menace. The ground beneath him trembled when Click reached out to touch Charlie's glorious mustache. Suddenly, the shadows leaped forward, wrapping around Click like a vice. He screamed a sound that echoed through the night, ringing out like a final warning. In a matter of seconds, where he once stood, there was nothing but the chilling silence and the faint, lingering essence of his greed. Word soon spread through Furry Hollow of Click's fate. Fear seized the town, and Charlie quickly became an outcast, a glorious, mustached creature of terror, rather than a beloved, gray-scaled mutt. The very thing that had once brought him affection now made him a target, and people began to stay away. With each passing night, the shadows grew bolder, creeping further into the town. A sinister presence seemed to pool in the corners of the streets. Furry Hollow was becoming a ghost of its former self, its charm overshadowed by the legend of the cursed mustache. Desperate to rid himself of the burden, Charlie sought out the warlock responsible for the curse. He found him amidst a grove of twisted trees and gave him an offering of cookies. The warlock kept his face hidden under a hood. He listened to his sorrowful whines, a glimmer of amusement dancing in his foxy green eyes. "Ah, the glorious mustache," he cackled softly as he took a bite of the cookie Charlie had brought him. "It brings not only beauty, but also the gluttony of those who seek to possess it." He offered Charlie a deal. Relinquish the mustache and the curse would be lifted. Torn between the gift he had cherished and the haunting consequences, Charlie had to make a choice. With a heavy heart, he allowed the warlock to snip away his prized possession, watching as it floated into the air, shimmering briefly before dissolving into a cloud of dust. The shadows quickly receded on the town, evaporating like smoke in the wind. But something in the air changed that night. While the curse was lifted, the townspeople never spoke of Charlie again. He became a ghost in the memories of Furry Hollow, a specter in the park with a hollow stare, forever longing for a beauty he had sacrificed to save them all. The town carried on, oblivious to the price Charlie had paid. The old friendships faded, but the whispers of his supernatural mustache still lingered in the wind, a tale of envy, greed, and the shadows that creep just beyond the night.
As our last tale fades into the night, I hope your imagination is still sparkling with the eerie wonders we've explored together. Remember, each story we shared is a thread woven into the fabric of the unknown, keeping our spirits alive and our curiosity ignited. Before we part ways, take a moment and let those chilling tales linger in your minds, reminding you that the shadows may hold thrilling mysteries yet to be uncovered. And as you venture back into your own world, keep an eye out for the strange and the uncanny. You never know when a story might unfold before you. Thank you for joining me tonight and allowing those whispers of the woods to swirl around us, and for keeping the campfire of imagination burning bright. This has been Rue, your cookie-loving wine-red fox, and you've been listening to For What It's Worth. Until next time, dear listener, stay curious and keep your nights just a little bit spooky.